everybody, it's Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our deep dive into this Likert layer and just see what kind of general sorts of things we might be able to share with someone in the event they had an activity that plotted in one of these 25 areas. So it's kind of like, as I've said on several calls already, this is kind of like more of an entry level experience with the change grid, and it'll all be demonstrated for you guys in due time. Just one second, can't see my participants list. Okay, there we go. So I think we've made it all the way up to number 8. Is that correct? Anyone want to confirm that? I think we made it up to number 8. So area 8 was when you might be in a situation where you perceive yourself as having a moderately low ability and a moderate level of challenge. And when we looked at the layer of the change grid that talks about the different roles that people could serve, this is where we had, I believe, the helper. Let's see if I can pull this one in. So yeah, so it's right here. It's kind of like the sweet spot for the helper kind of energy. Obviously, there's a bigger element of helper when you perceive your ability as being even lower, because what can you really do? You know, you don't have enough ability to be able to take any leadership sort of role around whatever that activity is. And so you're there to help. And if you have even less ability, then you're just going like, hey, you know, I'm 2 hands and an open heart. What do you need? So it's a little bit of a different sort of a spirit, but in both of those cases, it's still that helper kind of role that someone gets pulled into. If we looked at the layer about engagement, you can see that there's kind of it's all very much about awareness, but up here we have hyper-aware, hypo-aware. This is also just pure awareness. I tend to think of both of these bands being what's going on with people's level of awareness. So there is some awareness there. There might even be a little bit of a hyper-awareness, only because if we look at the levels of tension, yeah, well, that's 3 things at once. This little section right here, most of it, if you look at that, is at what level of tension? You know, most of that's at power stress. And so there's that, and this layer, since we're here, this is 3rd degree intensity. Well, that's barely half of the way you could go. So I don't think that it's really feeling like that big of a deal, if you will, as far as taxing you in some sort of a way. So moderately low level of ability, moderate level of challenge, pulls you into a helper mode, little bit of that power energy, little bit of a sense of urgency. I mean, you're there. I keep using the example of being a volunteer. You're there to help. Let's do something. So there's a little bit of an upgrade energy to that. Does that ring true for all you guys? Somebody unmute and chime in. Does that resonate with you? Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Silence is agreement. Thank you.
Right on.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Anyone want to add anything to what I've just said? Yeah. Okay. All right. So if we then take it up to what'll be area 9, it's this one right here. We might as well stay this layer and talk about what's happening. Layer 9, or rather, sorry, area 9 is when you perceive your ability as being moderately low, but now the challenge is getting a little bit spicier. It's up there at 7, 8, 9. So it's a moderately high level of challenge. So obviously, something is causing you even greater level of productive tension than you found before. So it's become more intense if you look at the intensity rings here, and you are further upgrade overall in this power stress kind of band of things. If we go to that layer that talks a little bit about the well, we can talk about the energies if we want. Yeah, so right there, you're kind of more of an analytical expressive would be the heart of it, moving up towards a moderate expressive. So kind of here in the middle kind of area. So yeah, balanced expressive right there would probably be the sweet spot. Okay, and we want to know what energies that's summoning. Rather than a helper, you're moving from helper up to energizer. And you might be energizing other people. You might be energizing the situation that you happen to find yourself in. Sorry, I gotta look at the right spot. But you most definitely are trying to energize yourself in this particular area of it. So I'll give you an example of an activity that I think falls for this. It's one I'm dealing with right now. Time for me to update my or renew my passport. So I'm going on a cruise right after Thanksgiving, and then I've got a couple I'm going on come springtime. And by the time the November one rolls around, I will not have 6 months of time remaining on my passport. So technically, nobody has to let me travel. So now's the time. Well, I've renewed it before, so I kind of know it's just a go to the website, follow the procedure, and stop by someplace and get a couple of pictures taken. So when I rate myself right now, I would say my ability to get it done is definitely very high, and the challenge isn't very low. So I'm kind of downgrade about the whole thing. As a result, it's been on my to-do list for well over a month. There's no reason why I didn't do it a month ago. I just didn't do it because I didn't have enough tension. But let's say that I'm someone who has never renewed a passport before, um, or is getting a passport for the first time. Well, how would they rate their ability to get that passport? I'm going to believe it's going to be moderately low or low. I mean, I think they understand. Okay, my system, my little point. Oh, there it is. They understand that they're going to a website. So hopefully they don't think they have no ability whatsoever. I'm going to think that the average person would rate their ability on the low end of things, but not necessarily down low ability. So maybe it's moderately low kind of ability. They've not done it before. How challenging is it? Well, on the one hand, they know they're just going to a website and following directions, so they might not think it's all that challenging, but they haven't done it before, so it's a bit of a puzzle to figure out. So that could be challenging, or maybe they've had bad experiences working with governmental websites before, and that's putting them off grid. And maybe they're thinking, oh, this is a passport, which is really the most powerful document I can have in my hand, is my passport. And so maybe they're kind of imbuing it with a lot of upgrade energy around it anyway. So I think someone who's in that situation may very well find themselves in this moderately high level of challenge, but your ability being anywhere from low to moderately low. So I'm just choosing this moderately low so we can talk about this. So it's a lot of energizer energy. Your tension is going up because in my particular description, there's a deadline now. It's still, I got plenty of time. I have almost 4 months before I'm going anywhere. So I think I'm all set as far as the timeline is concerned. But so again, I think I'm further downgrade. But if it was the first time I was around it, I would be worrying about, is it going to come in time? And oh my gosh, what if it isn't accepted? What if blah, blah, I don't know. I've not done it before. So I can kind of give that as an example of this area on the change grid where you're in power stress. You know you need to do something and know what you got to do. You're getting up there into 4th degree intensity. And you're probably getting pretty close to that threshold of activation. It'll be in here somewhere around here. If you're not really careful about it, you could actually get into just the border between power stress and stress. So the longer you wait, the higher it's going to be. Sooner or later, you're going to end up in stress and wonder, is there going to be time to get it all done? But right here, it's not that life or death situation we're going to find in the next area, area 10 up here at the top. But it's enough that there's a fire underneath you, and you got to really kind of stick with it in order to get the whole thing taken care of. Okay, anyone got any questions, comments, thoughts?
No, I think it's a good example. I just having just gone through that very process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's like, get the pictures.
Oh, the worst part was getting the pictures. The
Yeah, yeah,
worst part was getting a picture that you liked. But apart from that, which is, simply a dilemma growing older,
yeah.
but there isn't, yeah, I mean, there is the experience of going on the website. I bypassed it by going to my local town hall. And because I too experience a certain amount of stress around websites, not websites in general, but governmental websites, because there are issues around just downloading and making sure you have all the right forms and then reading
Exactly.
period
Yep.
thing. So no, it is a really good example, because you can easily find yourself moving up into the high stress area. They tell you 8 to 10 weeks before you're going to receive your passport. So,
Yep. Now,
so
Linda
that
got hers much faster than that. Linda, do you remember how long how long it was between your application and your new passport? And this is in the throes of COVID. So
that's great. You can also spend more to expedite it, but yeah.
yeah. But I think she got it done in just a few weeks' time. So she
Oh,
was lucky because they were telling
Yeah,
people at that
yeah, no,
time.
they told me that it would be several months. And I was just going crazy because the cruise I was going on, I needed to have it.
Yes.
And lo and behold, it came in less than a month. And I was like, whoa, this is cool.
Yeah, because they were telling us at that time, because of COVID and all that, short staffing, and there was something about Linda had to go somewhere. Didn't you have to go to one of the passport offices? I can't hear you, dear. You got to unmute. Okay. Well, she's not talking to us. So
Yeah. No,
I can hear it back there,
and it's probably not as long as they tell you, but I
which
think
is
that
good. Yeah,
the stress comes in that they give you the longest possible time that you might have to wait.
sure.
And then, which is only fair, I guess, but I think that that's where the stress would come into that. That's why I think it's a good example of
Mhm.
this space, because you're dealing with the potential for losing an opportunity to do something really important
That's right.
that you can't change,
That's
that you don't have any control over. And that's what makes it move, verging on that higher stress space.
exactly. So I think this is oh, hey, Brian. I think this is kind of an interesting sort of place because on the one hand, how do I put this? I think it's kind of like a routine day of power stress where you're out there trying to solve problems and figure things out and whatever. And so maybe you've got a little bit more perceived ability for some of the things you're trying to do. So you'd be out here a little bit power up to power stress. But if you're here where you think your perceived level of ability is moderately high, that's a little bit more nervous energy is going to come into play. Um, not being as logical as some of the things require. And I'm thinking about the websites because sooner or later you got to find the right form. And it's all there somewhere, but there's links galore, and who knows how updated it is. So that's what I'm putting out there. There's nervous energy. There are elements of missing resources, elements of perhaps a little bit of confusion as you sort through whatever there is to sort through. And for some people whose ability is even lower, it can be a little bit of a stressful experience. Certainly not the stress they would experience if they rated their level of challenge a 10, 11, or a 12, but enough challenge that it's really got them. And they probably need someone to intervene. Again, if I look at that layer with the roles that we could serve, now I would be on the brink between the helper and the energizer. If you're up here, it's all energizer energy. If I come here, keep squiggling, my pointer freezes. Yeah, it's kind of energizer, but again, I think a lot of time the energizer role is being self-applied. So the situation is energizing you, you might be energizing you, and likewise, you might be energizing others, and whoever those might be, but that's what's going on there. So yeah. Now, those of us who have done something umpteen times, like for example, every X number of years, Linda has to go online and update all of our federal registered trademarks. And the first time she did it, Linda, you can share your story, but the first time she did it, it's like she didn't know what she was doing. So, you got to go and figure it out. And so perceived ability has got to be pretty low. the challenge has got to be pretty high because it's one of those things where you want the copyright, or not the copyright, the trademark. Otherwise, why are you going through all the energy and the expense of trying to get it? So you want to make sure everything is just right and you're using the right term. So is it a series mark? Is it a trademark? Is it a registered trademark? So there's a lot of gaps in knowledge and certainly giant gaps in experience, but there's also this feeling like this is really important. We got to do it right the first time, so we're not wasting money.
And
Yep, go ahead, dear.
you have a time limit
Oh, when you go online, it's actually a timed form
or
completion.
all of your work disappears.
Yeah, so you're playing beat the clock. How does beat the clock affect your accuracy? Yeah, wow.
So what they want you to do is they want you to study all of the, they tell you everything you're going to need to fill out the form. So you've got to try and figure it out before you open the form and have all the information ready to go. But it's in like you need your reading glasses to read because it's all small print and it's page after page after page.
All right, there you go. So even Linda's description of it, that feels like it's a very upgrade experience. Now, again, she has to do it every X number of years. And so now her experience level is greater. However, there can be big gaps between the first time she got the trademark and this renewal period of time. So did they change a lot of stuff in between? Are there new puzzles that have got to be solved? You know,
And
yep.
What do we have? 6 or 7 trademarks?
Oh yeah, we got a pile of them.
One of them we got at a different time. And you have to keep track of between the 5th and 6th year, this one's due and this one's due in this year and that year. And they don't tell you because I don't know why they wouldn't tell you that it's coming up, but you're responsible for keeping track. And then you have to do it in 10 years.
Yep. And if you miss it, and someone else can grab your trademark. And there's a couple of other things out there that want master stream. And so if they're just watching for when's that expiration date for our master stream registered trademark, I think we'd lose it within 24 hours. So, so there's the point is it's a very upgrade experience. Even if you've done it before, I don't know that anyone, well, how about this? If you rated your ability to renew the copyright, the registered trademarks as 9, 10, 11, or 12, and you thought the challenge was low, moderately low, you're down here. And what do you think the chances are of protecting all of your intellectual property if that's the situation? Brian, you're unmuted. Any thoughts you want to share? At least you're unmuted on our end of things. So, okay, can't hear you if you're saying anything. All right, so that's what this section is really all about. So I don't think that, and I'm bringing that because when people are talking about this area of the change grid, it seems like even though they're describing it as power stress, which it is, they start to lean towards the stress end of things. So we're not talking about how power stress is actually a very useful place here. This is where most routine problem-solving aspects of life are going to happen. Maybe a little further outgrade if you've had more experience around doing it. What we don't want is for the kinds of changes that are heading our way to move us into this 5th degree of intensity or 6th or 7th. Obviously, I could have drawn these lines further all the way up, but then it would be high challenge plus, perceived ability plus, whatever's going on. Anyway, so the next square we really want to look at is this one that's directly above it. And so that's going to be area number 10. So area number 10, if we look at this, what level of tension is area 10 in? It is in stress, solidly up there in stress. In fact, half of area 10 or even more, that's not true. It's more than half of area 10 is in the danger zone. In fact, let's think about this. The danger zone gets cut at coordinates 1 and 10, or sorry, 2 and 10. So it's going to go straight across here. So the majority, you know what I could have done, because I already have it. There's the line. You drew the diagram, use it. So area 10 up here, it's almost entirely in the upgrade danger zone. It's definitely in heavy, heavy stress. 5th degree intensity is all you can handle before, body parts start to explode, brain cells start to dissolve. It's like, you're in a life or death situation. You're in a true panic sort of a state. You perceive your ability as being very, very low. The level of challenge is being extremely high. And so all the things we know about the danger zone are going to come into play. And just for the fun of it for a moment, let's go ahead and go to the adjective map. Oh, great. Yeah, it's right there. And I'll zoom in on this so people can kind of see what we're looking at. So we already know that that box is pretty much all made up of the upgrade danger zone. So all these words are what the person is going to be experiencing. Everything from distracted, flaky, unfocused out here to burned out, egotistical, obnoxious, overbearing. I mean, all this stuff is happening depending on what the tertiary energy would end up being, what direction they're leaning. So obviously, if you look at the words distracted, flaky, and unfocused, and the words over here, burned out, egotistical, obnoxious, and you were to draw a horizontal line, which represented the journey from the in-grid side of things to the out-grid side of things, you should be able to feel that energetically in these adjectives as we move further out-grid, even though we're still confined to only the highest little danger zone on the entire change grid. There's still a lot of subtlety and nuances that could be happening. In the heart of it would actually be probably 111-ish. But anyway, angry, changeable, forgetful, frightened. It's kind of an in-between sort of a thing. Up here, we'd also have alarmist and fickle and threatened. There is nothing good happening up here. And so I would believe that the reading that you would give to someone plotting in area 10 would really be about the the standard stuff we say when someone is way up in stress. Okay, so again, just as a try to get you guys to chime in a little bit, not all stress is created equally. So this area up here, let's go to the one that's numbered. This area 10 is a much more intense experience of stress than area 25 is. Area 25 is still stress, but the perceived challenge is a bit lower. That's going to be experienced differently, that intensity of 3. You come down to where it's moderate. Maybe that's where 2 comes in. I really don't know. I'd have to look at the intensity layers. There they are. So yeah, up there is all 5, 4, a little bit of 3, 3 and some 2. So we got some things that are changing as we work our way through there. Okay, questions about area 10? Or would you have plenty to say if that was where you were at? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So now let's move on to number 11. What's happening to number 11? Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot because I just heard you say something. So what's happening as we move from 10 to 11?
Well, their stress is coming down some, or they're moving down, I should say.
Yeah. So they're moving from where it was pure stress. Now they're moving down to almost like half stress, half power stress. So they're coming down. What's driving that reduction in tension? So what's the only difference between this square and this square?
Increased ability.
Increased ability. It's still not great, but the ability went up a little bit. And now that person is going to start having some of those thoughts about the person that's in power stress. Now, again, if I look at the layers of intensity, there's a lot of intensity there, 5th degree intensity, which is the same as it would be up in stress. So this is still an intense sort of a thing. So when I talk about what does intense power stress feel like? What does, again, we're talking about all these are really voices in your head. How does the languaging in your head change? When you're in this kind of a situation, it's still very intense, but now it's a little bit of stress still remaining, but we're moving into power stress. What sorts of things might that voice in your head starts saying to you about that situation? Anybody?
It's not as bad as I thought.
It's not as bad as I thought. It's not as bad as it could be. That's
Right.
good. What else is that voice in your head saying?
There's hope.
There's definitely hope. And then your head would go, but what's
Right.
the backside of it? What's the backside of it? But I think the word that I'm wanting to find here is there's still a sense of urgency. We still got to get moving. This has to be taken care of. So that 5th degree intensity feels differently than, again, go back to you got to get your passport. So the difference between you got to get your passport and this level of tension, you guys have to feel the difference between those two things, the intensity. Right. So this one is forget getting the passport. We got to save our butt. We got to take care of this problem. We got to get out of this troubled area. Again, I was just in the danger zone. So I'm coming down from that. In fact, if I looked at the overlay of the danger zones, one moment, please. Why does it keep getting stuck? I updated my operating system on my MacBook, and ever since I did it, it's been running slow. So yeah. It's annoying me. It's raising my tension. Where am I? Moderately low. I'm thinking I'm right here. It's pretty annoying. But it hasn't become problematic. It just froze again. It hasn't become problematic yet. So yeah, something's got to be done around it. So it's not up here. It's probably here. And I have enough Mac experience that it's probably really here, moderate ability. Yeah, and up here I'd be sweet talking to somebody and getting it done for me. We'll talk about that next. Okay, so remember we say that there's a word that describes the relationship that we have with control as we move from a stress into power stress. So how would you describe the sense of control we have when we're up in stress? We'd be feeling what?
Out of control.
Out of control. What do we do as we're moving into power stress?
In control.
We
Gaining in control.
Gaining, the word we've always thrown up there is seizing control. I do like gaining control because that would probably describe the relationship we have with control when we are in area 9 on the change grid, where moving upgrade a little bit, it feels like that urgency has just intensified, and now I've got to do it while I can get it done. This one I could wait another day. What's another day? Here, yeah, it's urgent. It's pestering me, blah, blah, blah. But up here, it's like, we got to get this done. And maybe that's where the person will be if someone says to them, well, it could take you 12 weeks to get your passport. You're leaving in 11 weeks, that could pull you up.
So if you're in that position where you're seizing this control, you're seeking as much information, you're kind of gathering things as much as possible.
Well, I think you've given that energy a lot more credit for gaining more knowledge. This, I think, is not so much, although there is an increase of ability that's occurring, knowledge is definitely part of that. I'm thinking this person is trying to seize control more over things like my focus and my time. That whole idea about moving me to top of mind, what me is the situation, to top of mind where it's inescapable. Forget everything else. This has to be done. And then to do it, absolutely, you're going to have to do something to increase your ability. And so knowledge being a big part of ability will start moving you even further down. So keep in mind, even if right now I move to section 12, which is right here, section 12 is mostly in power stress. So I'm still seizing control. So, but what's driving that seization? That's a new word, seization of control. Yeah. So that's it. So something's different between the sense of urgency I'm having when I'm in section 11 and the sense of urgency I'm having when I move into section 12. Now we'll talk about that in just a second in more detail, but that's what I think is really going on here. It's this transition point between stress and power stress, where I've basically said, I can't stay in this upgrade situation. I need to do something. And by the way, the voice in me would be saying like, you can't stay in this upgrade situation. You need to do something and you need to do it now.
Okay.
You know,
So that seasoning's more like psychological safety kind of thing.
right. That's what I'm
I
thinking.
got it.
That's
Okay.
what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. And I think it'll be very well illustrated when we talk about what's happening in section 12. But this to me, what I've just described seems to be what people say whenever they have anything in power stress. So we have a tendency to describe the levels of tension in their maybe 5th degree, 6th degree, if you get out to power kind of thing. I think we haven't really spent as much time thinking about, well, what happens if you just back off the perceived challenge a wee little bit? Is that going to change things? What
Interesting.
happens if we move it? So this is about understanding the subtleties of the less intense expressions people can be having with whatever the levels of tension happen to be.
It seems to be how humanity moves. And, you know, when we talk about the different social ills, like that sense of urgency gets people attention enough to where it's like, okay, yeah, we can't stay in this predicament. The
Right.
pandemic reminds me of that. I just had a call where we were talking about this idea of follow the science. It's a very contentious call because, you know, a lot of other physicians on the call is this idea that no one pays attention to that. And I said, well, in my opinion, when follow the science becomes about ideology, then you're not following the science.
Well, yeah. Those are far from the same thing. Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, let's look at what's happening on the adjective map. So again, it said that particular square, and again, it's not overlaid on the adjective map. So you guys just have to kind of think about when we looked at area 10, it was definitely all danger zone kind of stuff. So now we're looking at area 9 right around here. So tempted, superficial. We still have some of this stuff about grabbing things like opportunistic, a show off, acting, demonstrative. We're on the border here of some things, but this is definitely a place where a person is saying like, we've got to take advantage of this opportunity. We have to just do what we can do. You can be kind of superficial up there, kind of tempted. We got to do that. We have to satisfy whatever the hedonic sort of thing might be, you know. So there's a lot of energy going on around here that's prompting you to move, even though your perceived level of ability is only moderately low, is moderately low. So isn't that strange? You're basically in a mindset where you're saying like, look, I don't have much going for me at all, but we got to go. We have to do something. And so, yeah, maybe that's opportunistic. Obviously, we've got space here for a lot more adjectives. And I'm kind of feeling now that we're talking about things this level of detail, we might be able to add a few more adjectives in this area right here. Yeah, okay, we'll get to that at some point. All right, so, yeah. Now, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind because when we look at area 12, something else is happening. And this is something we've actually talked about before. And so when I look at this particular area, oh, by the way, if I go back to what we're looking at here, let's look at the energies for just a second. That energy right there is still mostly an expressive, but it's starting to become a bit of a driven expressive. Lots of feelings, lots of that going on, but it moves from thinking about it, talking about it, and feeling it all to doing something. It's not heavy to the doing yet. We're getting there, but but that's what's happening as far as your energy is concerned. So it's interesting, you know, you can look at all these different layers. You still are primarily that energizer. Let's the overlay. You're still that energizer kind of thing, but you're starting to touch up against the influencer. What's the difference between an energizer and an influencer?
Direction.
Direction, yeah. Tell me more about that. What's the influencer?
Well, the energizer is just trying to pump you up, but the influencer has a purpose.
Yep, trying to pump you up to do something. right? To get something done, to buy something, to move, to whatever. And that's going to help us very much understand what's about to be shown for this layer. And again, for most of you, this is going to be a reminder, something we've talked about before. So in fact, let me get into it the way we normally do, and we'll see what you say. So what do humans use as a form of compensation when they find themselves in a situation where they perceive their ability as only being moderate, but the challenge is being quite high indeed? High level of challenge, moderate level of ability. That means they recognize there are gaps in their knowledge, in their skill, in their experience.
That's when you're leaning out over your skis.
Leaning out over your skis. Tell us about that. How does that translate into
So you're starting to slip a little bit out of control. You're still headed in the general direction in which you're intending, but you're starting to lose control.
Okay, and so this is going to be really interesting as we talk about what really lives here. Yeah, so you feel like you're losing control, or you might lose control. There's a gamble that's going on because on the one hand up here, you were doing something very definitive to kind of get a little bit of control going because the sense of urgency was just so high. Well, now you're coming down grid a little bit. If we look at the levels of tension, you're at this, no, we'll do this one. You're at this place where most of it's still going to be power stress. So there's a great sense of urgency around it, but you're feeling a little bit more intense, or a little more intensity around it. That's going to be really important in a second. Yeah. Wow.
So you use
Okay.
some charm or in that situation. Try, because I was in that position where you're above your skis kind of thing. First time I went skiing, and I call it the Chris Tucker moment, because all I kept yelling was, "I don't want to die." And I was not in a situation where I was going to die, but to me it was traumatic in that way. But I was trying to use humor to try to, like, okay, I can balance, I'm a former athlete, I can do this thing. And it wasn't working.
That's right. Well, if you think about it right here, if I look at the energies, where you're at there is an intersection between the driven expressive and the expressive driver. Or to really think, if you're in the middle of it, as I'm squiggling right now, you're smack dab in between the driven expressive, the expressive driver. So maybe you actually have equal contributions of both expressive energy and driver energy when you're in this little spot. Okay, now Brian said, well, you turn on the charm. Well, there's a lot of things that we do when we are trying to, and the word, let's go to the adjective map for just a second. So we're right here. Bold, daring, excited, charming, convincing, jovial, promoting, suave, adventurous, and nervous. I think that's speaking to what David was pointing out about. You thought you were getting more in control, but no, don't count your chickens. Eager, energizing, motivating, persuasive, purposeful. And I think I could put you on the edge right here of captivating, charismatic, smooth, energetic, active, initiating. And then even upgrade a little bit if you want to see what's happening. Impressing, lustful, phony. So this area in the change grid is a fascinating one to really spend some time looking at, because there's certainly, this is where the whole world of romance lives, whether you're romancing another human being or you're romancing a deal. This is still what that energy is really all about, a nervous excitement, plenty of urgency around doing it, but very much, obviously the more driven you are, the more of those influential powers are going to come into need, if you will. All right. Is this interesting to you guys, or is this just something to kill an hour? Because I got to tell you, I find it rather fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's so important to be able to read the change grid, multiple layers at a time. So I think it's great practice.
Yeah, to be able to, because the more you spend time on the layers, the less you need the layers. Because what you're really doing is recognizing not what's happening add a layer in a particular area or named section of the change grid, you're going like, I understand that spot right there, you know, and I know that that spot is different than this spot right here. You start to
Mhm.
really recognize that everything that we can talk about as far as a descriptor goes is lives on a continuum. And we have countless continua that are going in every direction on every angle from all these different, you know, perceptions we have around it. So I've always thought that the more we have, the more we understand something that's in motion, the more our advice can be in motion, or the more dynamic the model is, the more dynamic we can be when we're sharing the model with someone, sharing those insights with someone.
Yeah,
I mean, again, we've just
absolutely.
mentioned, just in this little discussion of this one little section, how many different models have we actually just talked about? And we're going like, no, they're all really just, you know, different levels of focus on a certain layer, but we need all the layers to really know what's really going on with somebody.
Plus, what I like about it from a behavioral aspect is, when we meet a moment, we're meeting it from a position of status quo. It's like what
Mhm.
our our physical, mental, and emotional self has conditioned itself from. So in other words, there's always going to be blind spots there
Yep,
that
absolutely.
although we're experiencing a situation, just like when someone comes into the emergency room and say, hey, what's going on? They don't give you the full picture. They only give you parts of the
Well,
picture,
right,
and they give you the most prevalent aspect of where their pain is the most.
right,
You have
right,
to
right.
break that down and deduce, okay, it could be coming from this, it could be coming from this. And this is only after asking questions and going through other kinds of analysis. And I think
Yeah,
it's the
sure.
same thing behaviorally.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, when I think about, you know, this kind of area on the change grid, we use this kind of word influencer. I think this person still recognizes that they are not in control. They recognize that they're trying to seize control. Again, for the most part, they're in that, but they believe that they could lose out on it. So, give you some examples of that. We just talked about romance. Well, let's talk about in the animal kingdom, the world of mating rituals and things like that. I forget where we were. This is months and months ago, and I think I shared it with you guys. It was a video of this fish making a nest as a way of trying to attract a mate. And these nests are very elaborate, amazing geometry with all kinds of decorations and things like that. And a competitive male will be building their next nest, and sometimes the nests get too close to each other, and these fish start fighting with one another, but they're all trying to create their own nest that is so beautiful that a passing female will acknowledge your effort, and whatever the case may be. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that or
No,
examples
I
of
haven't seen
other?
that.
I think
Oh,
that's why I
good.
planted flowers in the front yard.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, it's all, or how about this? It's about putting on the right outfit, wearing the right cologne, the whatever. These are all part of the mating ritual in whatever animal species we're looking at. So we want to look our best and all that kind of stuff. So we get over here, rather than telling someone all about us, we influence by asking questions, being inquisitive, getting to know more and more about that person, because we recognize that not every nest is going to have a visitor.
Hmm.
So there's a competition that's afoot. There are aspects of it that are outside of your control. And so maybe you'll win, maybe you won't. But here you are trying to influence, schmooze, whatever the
Hey, T,
word
I
is. Yeah.
see it. Is that like a peacock in full bloom?
Pool peacock in full bloom.
Mm,
Exactly. Exactly. And they're
T,
very
interesting.
territorial. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I'm sorry. I was just wondering, do you see or sense or expect that there's any insecurity in that
Oh,
spot?
mhm. Yeah, because they don't perceive their level of ability knowledge, skill, experience. And remember, ability is also made about resources. And one of your resources is the physical you. And so they may be thinking that they have some shortcoming. And that's what that insecurity voice is all about, which is why they're trying up here to use something other than sheer ability to do that. Where I would think the most handsome fish who builds, who is for whatever reason is genetically blessed to be the world's best nest builder, still sees that there's a lot of challenge. Maybe not, maybe they're a little bit further down grid. But you get the idea. They're out here in that whole situation. These people here are just kind of going like, please, please, please don't let me be the last person chosen for, whatever they're doing. I don't know.
Mhm.
So get the idea. That's that energy there. That's that energy.
Yeah, that was actually a great book. I forget the author's name, but Influencer. They were talking about the science of leading change, and they gave all these examples of people who are doing this. But that model that they focused on had two axes, and there were three dimensions of it. But the axes were motivation and ability, and then they had I think one was social, and I forget what the other two were in terms of how they were driving this change. And they gave examples of like the lady, she's like a 4'11" lady who works with the hardest criminals from skinheads to pedophiles, and her home in San Francisco. And she has a low recidivism rate. Now, it's not a one-off thing because she's been doing that for over 20, 30 years, I think now at this point. So when people get out of prison, they come to her, they help them find jobs and the whole deal. But that's what the example in the book is talking about, this idea to appeal to the motivation, the ability through these three layers of social, connecting them with people. And I forget what the other two were, but it was an interesting book.
That's it. Yeah, if you can chat over any of the details around it, that could be one worth digging for. Yep. All right, let's see how we're doing time-wise. Oh, we still have 7 minutes. We can at least start the next one. So let's see, 10, 11, 12. This would be section 13 right here. So 13, now your energy is changing. There's a little bit of that influence energy still remaining, but mostly you're in that leader energy. So maybe you've made it through your, I would say, romancing sort of thing, and you've been chosen, but you still need to seal the deal or whatever. So however that applies. So you need to move out here and take on a little bit more of a leadership role, becoming a little bit more, again, if I go back to the adjective map, that's where we started seeing words like initiating, active, and then the problems can occur if you get further out grid, but captivating, impressive, dynamic, energetic, there's stuff going on here.
Would you envision that that's the spot where closing occurs?
Yeah, because I think that's the expressive driver energy moving closer to the driven driver energy to close the deal.
Yep.
All four of these driver energies can be successful salespeople depending on what the product is and who the targeted market is for it. So an expressive driver can get you jazzed about it. A driven driver is all going to be, close, 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 close. The expressive driver has a little bit more. Again, they're still in the romance mode. So they still understand that things can go off rail if somebody misbehaves or whatever. So they're still in that. An analytical driver is all about proving that the product is the right product and the deal is a good deal and all that. So they let evidence drive the decision. And an amiable driver is more service driven. So showing that the reason why you should give them the deal is because of the level of quality they are putting forth when it comes to their the actual delivery of the service or whatever, wanting to earn the right, earn your business, build loyalty, all those sorts of things, I think is exactly what's happening there. Yeah. Oh, Brian just texted over to, or chatted over to everybody, the book summary on influencer. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do,
that
by the way,
that
yeah,
the 6 sources of influence. That's what he was focusing on. So there's motivation, ability. So motivation, you ask the question, is it worth it? Ability, can I do it? And then it's on a personal, social, and structural level, each of those dimensions. That's what they came up with for that book.
interesting, very interesting. Well, we'll take a good look at that then. Just as a reminder for everyone, these identifiers that we have, remember that when we perform the merging of brilliance, after looking at umpteen different models, and we feel like there's enough to actually create a new layer, then we merge those all together and see how it actually looks at. Well, there were not less than 8 different models of human behavior that proposed 8 types existing. Some include a 9, which is just smack dab in the middle, but for the most part, there's a lot of methodologies or approaches that give you 8. Now, their 8 is still based on 4. And so they'll tell you that there is enough going on in a half-liter, half-energizer to take a closer look there. And there's enough going on between a half-energizer and a half follower to take a look about what's going on there. So they've decided to just turn the 4 into 8 by looking at the borders between the other energies. So I said there's more than 8 of them. We chose one identifier from each of those 8 models. So there is no one model that uses all of these unless you want to consider our merging of them to be its own model. But you're going to find one that will talk about the advocator energy, but they have different names for all the rest of these. And so I'll be a thinker, but they've got different names for all the rest of these. So 8 different models. We used one identifier from each of those models. Okay, anywho, I think we're coming up on our time. So let me just tell you where we're heading next, because some of them are going to become very easy now moving forward. If we look at area, where's the numbers? There we go. Area 14, just like area 10 was almost entirely in the upgrid danger zone. Area 14 is almost entirely in the outgrid danger zone. And area 18 is almost entirely in the downgrid danger zone, and same thing for 22 and the in-grid danger zone. So those are things that we already can give people a lot of insight around that whole danger sort of thing. So this is really a bit more about understanding what are the differences between, well, as we just did, 11, 12, and 13. So what's the difference between 15, 16, and 17? What's the difference between 19, 20, and 21? So that's what we wanted to talk about. So maybe we can get these finished up on the last call or the next call we do. I don't know. I'll say if we get halfway around, I'll be very happy with this. Any questions, any comments before we're done for now?
Good
Will you
stuff.
be using that?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Will you
All right.
use this with your positive living group?
Yeah, again, the whole reason why I wanted to do this layer was because I wanted to, first of all, give all of you another reference guide that isn't as detailed as an adjective map, but gives you a little bit more to say than just the 5 levels of tension. So that was the goal, was to just give you that. I'm working on that right now, where I can say, here are the characteristics of this particular area. Here's what this area might be good for. Here's how this area might be problematic, and give you that as a reference guide. And to your point, we are playing right now with the Oracle, how it's going to run on YouTube. And bottom line is that your YouTube video is going to point you in the direction of one of 25 videos. And that's where you're going to get your reading. So whatever little summary sheet I give you guys contains, that's going to be the content for whatever we talk about for that particular location on the change grid. So yep, so that's what it is. All by itself, I don't really think we would consider this to be a layer that provides unique information to someone who's exploring the change grid. All it's really doing is giving us another reference tool for summarizing things that are happening through all layers, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. That being said, there are a couple of models of human behavior that do divide humans into 25 groups. And so that could be an interesting thing to look at. And by the way, a lot of them too might not be so much about describing the individual, but talking about the level of productivity we can expect to get out of someone who perceives their ability as being low and the challenge as being high. But when I've seen those things, I've said, yeah, but the first thing you have to understand is how does that individual that you're trying to put into a more productive state rate when it comes to importance? So you get the idea. I don't care if my ability is a 10, or rather, no, let me use the right language, is moderately high, and the challenge is moderately high. They're going like, oh, that's in a perfect spot for this activity to get done. Yeah, but what if I think the importance is like a 2? That's going to affect things greatly. So I think that we got to look at the right questions in the right order. And I think also, we look at size, because size is important, because if I'm a set of executives or leaders in an organization and I'm using only this 2-dimensional tool that says, hey, they're in a perfect place to do that, I'm not factoring in how overwhelmed they may be by the sheer volume of work that is already on their plate. So this concept of how big is the situation, how big is the task, does come into play when we want to set realistic expectations of what someone is actually able to achieve. So if I think the task is huge and important, and I'm out here at activities, I'm out here with 13 or 15 or whatever, everyone might think that this is all just fine and dandy, but there's a dark side to that combination of perceptions, and they need to be able to look at that. Yeah. All right. Well, that was a long answer to a short question, but depending on how someone is trying to apply the change grid, those other 2 dimensions become essential. When it comes to someone having a first experience with the change grid at Oracle of the Self, I'm already taking care of the importance question by prejudicing their selection of activities. I'm saying to them, what's really going on right now that's causing you the most concern? What's most important to you right now? What big goal are you working on? I mean, I'm intentionally trying to, what do I say, acknowledge and incorporate the importance rating without having to get them to actually rate the importance of what's going on. Yeah. And yeah. So
Excellent.
yeah, well, we'll see.
No,
Again,
I think it's great because it's one thing to have content in terms of why one perceives they're experiencing what they're experiencing. Another thing to help them contextualize it in real time. And that's harnessing the power, I think,
that's
of
exactly right.
all 3 together.
After 40 plus years of doing this, I can tell you that we have a problem, and the problem is the sheer volume of content that we could talk about. So, I mean, it's an interesting problem to have, but it's still a problem. I have too much content. And the greatest challenge for me has always been, I say, compartmentalizing certain elements of that content to meet the person where they are. And so how I've kind of avoided that all these years is to say, look, this whole discussion about tension management is for the brightest and the best. And so when I get in front of an audience, I understand that whatever level I'm presenting it at is going to leave some people in the dust, but it's going to highly captivate the real thinkers that are in the group. And I would rather err on the side of impressing the best minds in an audience than wondering, training to the lowest common denominator. So that's me. So I don't know if any guys agree with that or not, but that's what's always happened. So I've always given people a lot more information than a similarly timed program might include. Because anyway, I could keep going, but you get the idea. I need to do the opposite right now. I need to make things this very simple and approachable, but yet deep enough that there is real meaning to come out of it. So as I said before, we can't just do a 3-point low, medium, high. We can't just look at 5 levels of tension. That's just not enough content to give the person what I think is a meaningful, useful level of insight into what's going on. So even with 25, I'm going like, it doesn't feel like enough. But there you go. You get the idea. All righty. So with that, I will say thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Have yourself a wonderful couple of days. We'll continue this on Thursday. So take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.